Peter Hitchens is here, columnist of the Mail on Sunday. Peter, very good morning to you.
Morning.
I mean, ridicule, I think, is all we have left. I mean, it's the last...
It's great ridicule, and I think people should make more use of it.
It's the last bastion of Britishness.
I don't know how it is you're getting it to snow inside over there. I can't get to do that here.
No, I can't manage. I can't explain that. We've had a lot of problems.
Why doesn't it settle on your shoulders?
Well, that'd be dandruff, obviously.
Oh, right.
Let's talk about your piece in the Mail this morning. I was delighted to see it, to be honest, because I had the misfortune of watching this bleeding film Blitz about 3 weeks ago. And I thought it was dreadful. I just thought it was so contrived, so ridiculous, and so kind of deliberately offensive, I thought. But I didn't really know how to articulate it. You've articulated it very well, because that's what you do.
Well, I love war films, and I'm moved by the whole era that it depicts. And so when I saw the films being made about that period, I felt, well, I should at least give it a try. And it has some pretty good actors in it, particularly the two central stars. And it's I don't criticise their performances either. I think that the thing as a film is technically highly accomplished, and that's part of the problem, that an awful lot of work and effort and skill and experience has gone into making a film which is fundamentally wrong. And I think it turns an episode which was never as simple as we were brought up to believe, and you and I both were brought up into the idea of the Blitz as Britain can take it, and the finest hour. And of course we now know things about it, that there were criminals stealing from bombed houses and stuff like that, pretty sordid. But the concentration of this on the adventure of I think he's supposed to be 9 at the time, George, the actual hero of the film. The concentration on it on racial prejudice seems to me to be possibly historically wrong. To reflect back into the 1940s, things which did happen, I think, in Britain particularly in the 60s, after the black population in the country went up, and there was I think a good deal more spite after that, fermented by Moseleites and people like that. But in general, and this is fascinating, I often recommend to people a very fine novel by Neville Shute called The Checkerboard, which portrays, it looks to me as if it was drawn from the life, I think such things did happen, an episode where British people pretty much rose up in revolt against the appalling segregation imposed on black American soldiers here who'd come to Britain for D-Day. And I think the attitude of most British people, and I quote in the film an African-American journalist who came here at the time, the attitude of most British people during that period simply wasn't as it's portrayed in this film, and I think it's a pity to do that. There's another thing about it which I found interesting. It's partly because I myself am so obsessed with this era. It is actually appallingly true that the government in 1940 resisted attempts to open up the London Underground as a mass shelter against bombing. And it is also true that there were protests against this, and that these were headed, in fact, by a very skillful and clever communist activist called Phil Peratin, who became one of the very few communist MPs ever to sit in Parliament. But the communists at the time weren't supporting the war effort. They weren't doing this to help the people of the Blitz. They were doing this as propaganda to try and get this country to make peace with Hitler, which was the policy at that time of world communism. This is very fascinating to see this portrayed in a completely uncritical light in the film, and disturbing. I just think here is a great opportunity. These days we have all kinds of facilities. We can make really films in superb colour in the way that the actual war films were not. We have CGI in which we can recreate without destruction the actual scenes of war, and portray it with. And there are some very very striking portrayals of what war looked like and what bombing looked and sounded like. But why this message? I think it's such a. It
seems to me that
I don't say this while saying that it's a bad film technically or badly acted.
No, it's not. But just, I mean, the thing that I found so distasteful about it was it seemed that the director went out of his way to make points which were clearly not historically correct. And, you know, I know that you have poetic license and all of that, creative license, whatever, but for people who don't know, the story centres around a mixed-race child who is born to a white mother who had a black father, and then it goes into this whole kind of, you know, network of what would you loosely describe as sort of black culture in London in the 1940s. I took the trouble of looking up historically what the black population was in the 40s, and it was around about 12,000, mostly people living in port cities where they might have come on ships basically from other parts of the world. So Liverpool, Portsmouth, you know, that kind of thing, Glasgow as well, but certainly not in Blitz-ridden London.
It's unlike, it's, as I say, it seems to me to project backwards onto 1940 things which were much more true of the late 1950s and 1960s. And my recollection myself of growing up particularly down in Devon, in rural England in the 50s, well, I remember seeing my first black person. And my wife was attending a school in South London around about the same time, and they got their first black pupil. And both of us remember that there was a sort of guarded puzzlement and a strong desire to be nice.
Yeah.
Not the way it was portrayed, and the way in which the boy runs it. There's a particular scene I didn't like where he's peering through the window. I think it's Hamlet's toy shop in Regent Street. Yeah. And a police officer comes up behind him and chases him away. And the police in the film, they just don't look the way policemen in those days tended to be tall. Yeah. And these are all sort of little necklaced 5'3" creatures with miserable expressions on their faces. It doesn't look or sound. I'm not sure that a policeman would have chased a mixed race or black child away from the window of Hamlet's toy shop in that way. No. And there's another scene where he's chased away from the window of a baker's, where the baker himself makes some disparaging remarks about black people. It didn't ring true to me. Now, I wasn't there, and anyone who's watching can tell that I, of course, have white privilege, so I may be completely wrong, but I just thought it was loaded in the wrong direction. Yes. And to me, could they make a film about, if they want to make this point, could they make a film about something else? And you could make a film, for instance, about, say, Notting Hill in the 1960s. Yeah. The activities of the horrible Sir Oswald Mosley and things like that, which would make an actual truthful point. And no one. But
but why invent it though? That's my problem.
To many people, and I'm actually probably more sceptical about this than most people of my generation. For many people, that particular era is almost mythical. Yeah. Time of heroism and doggedness. Which we don't really want to see rewritten as a time of racial bigotry and pleasantness.
Well, the scene I thought was unnecessary was the one where after, you know, the mother had met, this was before obviously the child was born, it was sort of flashback to when she was in this, you know, amazing club, as if this was the greatest club that anybody had ever seen, and it was only great because it was a black club, and then she walks out with the presumably the potential father of her child, and he starts to get racially abused and beaten up by some white people, and all the white people in the film are sort of horrible, and all the black people in the film are lovely. And I just think it's with
the exception of Paul Weller.
Yes, I don't know what he's doing in it, by the way.
All modern TV series and films have in them a character who represents the 21st century, and who can look down on the stupidity and bigotry of all the people living in 1940. I think, well, it's all very well being superior and knowing everything we now know and feeling good about ourselves. My view is we should. It's a basic rule of life. Consider what might be wrong with you, rather than exploring the past to find out what was wrong with that. Imagine, if you like, somebody making a film about the 2020s, and see what they might think was really, really odd and despicable and worrying about us. Think of that instead of inventing fictions about 80 years ago, which, again, as I say, it invades an era which is very important to me. And I think the whole business of the war film in this country, I know obviously the large numbers of people growing up now to whom the Second World War is meaningless, and they can't tell the Second World War from the First World War. I know we saw University Challenge a few weeks ago where a team from, I think, Durham, one of the best universities in the country, it had no idea who had commanded the RAF during the fighter command during the Battle of Britain, and thought that that they had actually been commanded by Douglas Haig, the man who sent thousands to their deaths in the Battle of the Somme. People don't know this, but those of us who still do have strong feelings about it think, well, if you want to make a film about bad things in the past, make it about times when these things were actually happening. Don't project your own concerns onto this particular period.
Quite. Well, what chance have we got when the Secretary of State for Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs on Mastermind couldn't tell the difference between Marie Antoinette and Marie Curie? You know, but that's another matter. Let's talk about Lucy Letby, because we had some news this week. We interviewed the barrister in the case who's seeking to reopen an appeal. What do you think? I mean, I said to him, as a matter of law, surely this is just a change of opinion rather than a change of evidence, but you may have a different view.
I think what's actually happened is that, taking this as a sort of tidal matter, for many, many months, the idea that Lucy Letby was undoubtedly a horrible killer of babies was generally accepted idea, and the tide flowed strongly in that direction in public opinion, in the media and everywhere else. Then there came a period when more and more doubts were raised, which I would have called slack water, when there wasn't much happening. I think that press conference in London on Monday was the turn of the tide. I think things were said at that event, and the strength of the case against the safety of Lucy Letby's conviction was so strongly made that I think from now on it really is a matter of how long it will take before the courts are willing to reconsider something which obviously ought to be reconsidered. The strength of medical and scientific opinion, 50 people now, expert in their fields, working without any kind of reward on the evidence of the case to set forward the case that in fact she was not properly convicted, is absolutely astounding, and it will over time, I think, make this case return to the courts. I know you can tell the appeal court doesn't want to handle it at the moment, and that's natural. I've said before, it's almost as if judges were programmed to reject. They don't like to reconsider jury decisions, and I understand that, and I actually think in many ways it's a good thing. But on this occasion, they are eventually going to have to, and I think that press conference on Monday was the moment at which we began to move towards that, slowly but surely. And the battle to get national attention for what appears to have been a very major miscarriage of justice is not by any means won, but it has begun to be fought very seriously.
Yes, I think you're right. It's moved, the dial has moved significantly, and I wonder as well whether the court will address why, in the first instance, the judge didn't listen to the defence, who said, we question this particular witness, this guy, Dewey Evans. You know, we're not sure that he's a reliable witness, and so it's turned out to be. But that was not brooked whatsoever by the judge.
Well, but the point is that it was raised, and therefore it now looks more legitimate to say, well, why didn't you do? I think, and I disagree with some of my fellows in this campaign for justice. I think that what we absolutely should not do is engage in attacking people on what you might call the other side. I believe that we should assume absolute good faith on the part of the prosecution and the police and the judge involved. That wasn't the problem. The problem was that in some way the case came loose from its moorings. It was not conducted properly according to the really serious rules of presumption of innocence. There was, of course, a de jure presumption of innocence, which was observed in the court. But in the world outside, I'm not at all sure that there was, and as a result, that was reflected back into the courtroom, and I think it affected the way things happened. And there's also this abiding mystery, which I don't seek to solve because there's no point. Why wasn't a serious expert witness called in Lucy Letby's defence on medical matters? It still remains astounding that the only witness who appeared in her favour, apart from herself, was the hospital plumber. And there is now an opportunity for that to be rectified. And experts are lining up, as I say, unpaid and unrewarded, working in their own time, bringing forward increasingly the expert case against Lucy Letby's guilt, which was not heard in the court in Manchester.
Absolutely. Peter, good to talk to you. Have a good Christmas if I don't see you until afterwards. Enjoy it. It may be some small comfort for people to live in this country where everything's costing more money and everybody's pretty miserable under Keir Starmer, but there we are.